Sometimes what wins a battle is neither courage nor long preparation, and sometimes what you lose is not an aircraft, but a pilot. June 19, 1944, early morning. The sky over the Philippine Sea appears calm. The American fleet seems headed for an uneventful day. But this calm does not last. American radar screens suddenly light up. Dozens, then hundreds of signals show Japanese air forces advancing like a massive wave. This is a final attempt, perhaps even a final dance. Pilots prepare on the decks of American aircraft carriers. Hellcat fighters are lined up, engines warming, crews moving with quiet urgency. Everyone knows this will not be an ordinary air battle. This will be the moment when control of the Pacific begins to change hands. On the Japanese side, the situation is very different. Most of their pilots are young and inexperienced. The veterans who survived Midway, Guadalcanal, and Rabaul are largely gone. In their place are rookies who completed training only months earlier, pilots with limited flight hours and little formation experience. Their mission is clear: stop the American fleet. But both sides understand that this will not be easy. This is not just another engagement. It is a battle that will shape the future of the Pacific. What no one yet realizes is that this day will become one of the most one-sided air battles in history. So what was this battle really? A demonstration of American pilot superiority? Or the result of a Japanese Air Force already stretched beyond its limits? And was the nickname the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot a celebration of victory or an admission of a harsh reality? You'll soon see that what happened over the Philippine Sea had little to do with individual heroism. It was about one system overwhelming another. Radar coverage, pilot training hours, fuel logistics, air control networks, every element had already shaped the outcome. And after this battle, Japan would lose its ability to challenge American control of the skies and effectively abandon large-scale air offensives. By June 1944, the momentum of the Pacific War had fully shifted to the American side. The Mariana Islands were under attack, amphibious landings were underway on Saipan, and Japan was playing its final card to stop this advance: a carrier-based airstrike. But the Japanese faced a serious problem, actually. Several problems. The first problem was pilots. The men lost at Midway, Guadalcanal, and across the Solomon Islands were gone for good. Japan's most experienced aviators had been bled out over the previous years. Replacing them were young, eager, but inexperienced pilots. Many had only 100 to 150 hours of flight training. By contrast, the earlier generation of Japanese pilots had entered the war with 500 to 700 hours. The second problem was doctrine. Japan still clung to an aggressive attack and win mindset, but it no longer had pilots of the same quality, nor aircraft as reliable as before. The advantages Japan enjoyed early in the war had disappeared. The third problem was logistics. Japanese aircraft carriers could no longer be resupplied effectively. Fuel was scarce. Spare parts were limited. Aircraft maintenance suffered. The war was slowly draining Japan's ability to fight. On the American side, the situation was the complete opposite. Task Force 58 was the most powerful naval force in the Pacific. 15 aircraft carriers, hundreds of fighter aircraft, advanced radar systems, centralized air control. American pilots went through extensive training. 300 to 400 flight hours had become standard. Formation flying, interception tactics, air combat simulations, everything was systematic. Everything was structured. But the true advantage wasn't just preparation. It was the system itself. The American Navy used radar, and that changed everything. Radar allowed enemy aircraft to be detected from dozens of miles away. American pilots were no longer surprised. They were already in position, the correct altitude, waiting. In air combat, surprise is half the battle, and the Japanese could no longer achieve it. There was another critical difference: centralized air control. American carriers employed a system known as fighter direction. Pilots received precise instructions based on radar data. Enemy formation at 10 o'clock, 40 miles out, altitude 15,000 feet. The pilots were not blind. The sky was organized. Every move was calculated. The Japanese had no equivalent system. Their pilots took off, flew toward the target, and fought whatever they encountered along the way. Coordination was weak. Communication was unreliable. Each pilot was effectively on his own. On the morning of June 19th, the Japanese launched more than 400 aircraft, the sky filled with planes. The pilots were tense, some excited, some afraid, but their orders were clear. Strike the American fleet. American radar detected them long before they arrived. Orders went out immediately. Scramble, climb to 15,000 feet, hold position. And the Hellcats took off. The Hellcat was one of the finest fighters the U.S. Navy had produced up to that point. Fast, durable, heavily armed. But what mattered most was how it was used. American pilots knew the Hellcat inside and out. They understood its strengths and fought accordingly. As the Japanese formations approached, American fighters were already waiting above them, behind the sun, in a position of advantage. And then the attack began. Put yourself in the place of a Japanese pilot. You've flown for hours. You're exhausted. Ahead of you is a fully deployed American fleet. You press on, and then you hear the sound of gunfire behind you. You turn, you see a Hellcat. You try to maneuver. It's already too late. Your aircraft is hit. The losses began exactly like that. Then another Japanese formation started to disintegrate. Some planes were destroyed before ever reaching their targets. Others tried to turn back, but the American pilots stayed with them. Jokes started circulating over American radios. This is like a hunting trip. Feels like target practice. A phrase began to spread among the pilots. Turkey shoot. And that was the brutal truth of it. Japanese aircraft, flown by inexperienced pilots, advanced without coordination or protection, and American pilots shot them down, one after another. This battle was not won by courage alone. It was won by a superior system. Now ask yourself, if Japanese pilots had received more training, if they had radar, if they had centralized air control, would the outcome have been the same? Probably not. But war does not deal in what-ifs. And this is where the real lesson emerges. Wars are not won only in the sky. They are won in training programs, at radar stations, and across supply lines. And when one side builds a better system, it must and will use it to the fullest. Over the Philippine Sea, around 2 p.m., the sky had descended into pure chaos. Dozens of aircraft were circling, colliding, exploding. Smoke, fire, parachutes, something was happening in every direction. But this chaos was one-sided. The Japanese side had effectively been defeated. On American radar screens, Japanese signals were steadily disappearing. With each passing minute, another contact vanished. The radars didn't just show incoming threats, they showed enemies fading away. American pilots flew in disciplined formations. They supported one another. When one pilot attacked, another covered his back. The teamwork was seamless. This was the payoff of training hundreds of flight hours, coordination drills, simulations, and real-world experience now coming together in the sky. The Japanese pilots, by contrast, were scattered. Each man was on his own. Some were still trying to reach their targets. Others were simply trying to survive. There was no coordination. Communication had collapsed. Every pilot was fighting a personal battle. An American pilot called out over the radio, "I've stopped counting them. I'm just firing." Another replied, "Anyone got ammo left? I'm empty." It had become a hunting ground in the air. But among American pilots, the dominant feeling wasn't pride. It was disbelief. Many realized in that moment just how inexperienced the Japanese pilots were. After returning, one pilot said, "It was like they'd never been in combat before. Their maneuvers were simple, predictable. The pilots we faced at Midway weren't like this." And here, the harsh truth of the war became clear. Japan wasn't just losing aircraft, it was losing pilots. Aircraft could be replaced, pilots could not. By the end of the battle, American losses were relatively light. 123 aircraft were lost, but many of those were planes that ditched into the sea after running out of fuel. Pilot losses were low. American rescue systems were effective. Pilots who went down at sea were often recovered within hours. On the Japanese side, the situation was catastrophic. Roughly 300 aircraft were destroyed. Hundreds of pilots were lost, and those losses were irreversible. Japan lacked both the time and the resources to train replacements. At the same time, American submarines struck another blow. Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk. Taiho, Shokaku. The Japanese Navy was losing not only aircraft, but the very platforms that launched them. When the battle finally ended, the sky grew quiet again. But this time, only American aircraft remained. Now imagine yourself in that sky. Planes are falling around you. Your comrades are gone. You're exhausted. Fuel is running low. And you know deep down that you cannot win this war. What do? Turn back and flee, or keep going? Many Japanese pilots kept going. Turning back was dishonor, but pressing on meant death, and it is here that one of war's most painful realities reveals itself. Courage alone is not enough. Without training, preparation, and systems to support it, courage becomes nothing more than sacrifice without purpose. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, nothing was the same. Japan did not just lose aircraft and pilots, it lost its strategic initiative. From that point forward, it no longer had the ability to strike offensively in the Pacific. It could only defend. Japanese naval aviation effectively came to an end with this battle. 3 aircraft carriers were sunk. Roughly 600 aircraft were lost. But the true loss was the pilots. Hundreds of aviators, both experienced and newly trained, vanished from the skies that day, and Japan had no way to replace them. On the American side, losses were comparatively light. 123 aircraft were lost, but pilot casualties were minimal. The system worked. Rescue operations were fast. Logistics were strong, and American air power emerged from the battle even stronger than before. The nickname, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, was coined later by American pilots. It was not meant as simple bragging. It was an acknowledgement of the imbalance they had witnessed firsthand, because they understood that this victory was driven far more by systems and preparation than by individual heroism. After this battle, Japan effectively stopped attacking in the air. Its strategy shifted toward defense, and eventually, toward kamikaze attacks. Traditional air combat was no longer a viable option. The Mariana Islands were secured. Saipan, Tinian, Guam, all fell under American control. These islands became the launching grounds for strategic bombing raids on Japan. B-29 bombers were deployed, and with that, Japan's fate was sealed. Perhaps the most important lesson of the Battle of the Philippine Sea is this: wars are not won only in the sky. They are also won in training programs, radar laboratories, and logistics networks. Courage and dedication matter, but preparation matters more. American pilots were not braver, they were better prepared. Japanese pilots were not lacking courage. They were simply outmatched by a superior system, and that difference determined the outcome of the war. In the next video, we'll examine the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the emergence of kamikaze tactics, because the defeat in the Philippine Sea pushed Japan toward new and far more desperate strategies, and those strategies would make the end of the war even more painful.